Hi everyone, today I'm going to be teaching us how to make a simple abaya gown. Very simple, and you can make it within few minutes. Now for me, I'm going to make my gown a short one, and I'll be using a length of 42. So this is my material. I bought just a trouser of this material, a trouser and half, depending on how long you want it to be and how short you want it to be. So all I need to do is that I took my material this way and folded into two. Can you see? So it all depends on how full you want it to be. If you want it to be fuller than what I'm doing now, that means you have to buy so many yards. So you take it in this direction, in the direction of the yard. But I'm taking it in the direction of the length of that clothes, not the direction of the yard. So this is it. I folded it into two. So after folding into two, that means this one will represent my front piece and this will represent my back piece. I'm going to fold it again, since the same thing will be in the front and the back. So I have the same neck, same measurements for both the front and the back, and I'm using a very stretchy material for this gown. So this is it. I folded it now. So now I have 4 pieces. This is it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the next thing is to measure the length of the gown. So I'll be using 42 for the length of my gown. So I'm just going to measure it straight down. .42. So I'm going to add a seam allowance of, let's say, 1.5. I'll use 1 inch below and have to join at the shoulder. It all depends on whatever you want to use. So that makes it for 3. So you can do that again the second time. Mark your 43 and then you can cut it out. This fabric can be very funny, so sometimes you might decide to pin it down after folding into 4. It could easily shift. Okay. So I'm cutting it out. So once I'm through with the cutting out, I have the length of my clothes already. The next thing is to come to the shoulder side and get your depression. So because this kind of shoulder is attached, it's looking more or less like a kimono, but it's actually like an abaya gown. You still do more of abaya wears. This is just one very simple one. So you measure whatever you want your length to be, but since this length is not too big, I'm just going to use the length like that. So I'll come here. Now the depression this time around, I'll use 2 inches. 2 inches for my shoulder slope or depression, whatever you want to call it. Now you have to determine what you want for your neck. So I'm going to be using a width of 5 by 3, and I'm using the same thing for both the front and the back. I hope we can see what I'm doing. So this is the neck. Now the next thing is I'll connect this shoulder together. I'll connect the tip of the neck width to my depression. I don't have a darker chalk, but I believe you get what I did. This is my neck and this is the depression. I did it straight to where the depression end from the neck width here. So I'm going to cut that now. So this is the neck and then the depression. The next thing now is what I want for my round sleeve. So I'm going to use a round sleeve of, let's say, 6, or let me just say 15. So I'll add seam allowance, a round sleeve of 7.5, that's 15. Divided by 2 give us 7.5. So this is 7.5. Then I'm going to add 1 inch as my seam allowance, and you remember that I'm still going to join it at the shoulder here. So that's 1.5. So that's what I have at this point there. So once I'm through with that, the next thing is to measure wherever I want my abaya, the freeness to stop. So I want it to stop around, just around my hip, but I'm going to add like 1 or 2 inches to it so that it's free enough there. So my hip is around 24, but I'm going to use 25. So I hope you get that. You can take it as low as you want. Some people prefer it to drop below their hip. So I'm using here. So I'll come down by 1 inch at this point here. And once I'm through with that, the next thing is that at this point, I'm going to measure whatever my hip is and add my ease. So my hip is 42. So 42 divided by 4, what will that give us? It will give me 10.5. So then I'm going to add ease of 1 inch. And then a seam allowance of 1 inch. I hope that's clear. I'll retake that again. My hip is 42 divided by 4. I got 10.5 plus 1 inch for ease and 1 inch for the seam allowance at the sides. So the next thing I'll do now is to connect it together. So we're going to connect this together. You're going to connect this one here. Can use a ruler too. I'm going to use that in connecting it together. I hope that's clear. and then whatever is here, you take it down straight. So I had 12 and a half there. I'm just going to measure 12 and a half downwards. And I'll measure 12 and a half here too. So I'm going to use my ruler to connect it together. And that's all. Now I'm going to cut and join the sides together. And that will be all on our simple, very easy abaya wear. You can sew it with a little material. I'm still going to do a video on cow kaftan, so that will actually require much more material than this. Please, you have to be very careful when dealing with this kind of material. It's very, very, very soft and it can easily shift. So this is what we have. And then the only thing left now is to determine how you want your neck to be. Do you want to cut the facing for it, or you want to use a bias, or you just want to sew it that way? You weave the neckline here and then sew it in this way. You can do a double stitching, just sew it on it. So even without having a sophisticated machine, you can sew this very simple style. But then I would like to put a band on my round sleeve here, just to make it look really good. I like to put a band. So I told you that I said my round sleeve that I wanted to use 15. So I'm going to measure 15 now. So what I'll do is that depending on how wide you want the band to look like. So now this is my leftover fabric. I doubled it. You have to be careful. This is a bit shorter than the other one. So I think 1 inch to 1.5 is okay for me, but you know it's going to be on fold. So this is it. To make it easier, after doubling this way, just fold like this. So measure 7.5 and add your seam allowance to it. So I'm cutting out 8.5. So this is 8.5. And what I'm doing right now means I'm cutting 2 together. So this is 8.5. And since I said I want either 1 to 1.5, I'm just going to measure. This is, if I need 1 inch, that means since it's going to be double this way, I'm going to measure the 1 inch like this and add the seam allowance I'm going to use in joining this band to the cloth. So I can just make it like 1/3, so I don't use too much of allowance. I'm going to use just quarter to join it to the cloth. I hope that's clear. So now I'm going to cut it out. So this is it. So I'm going to open it this way and cut it into 2, since I'm cutting both bands together, the one on the right and left hand. So this is what I have. This is my band. So now in sewing this clothes now, the first thing you're going to do now, is take this on the shoulder and sew half, or whatever you used as your sewing allowance. You do the same to the other side. Make sure the right side is facing the right side of the other part. Right side of the front is facing the right side of the back. So you do the same on this side to sew it round. So the next thing is to sew your neck round. So you can use a bias to just sew it round, or cut a facing. I'm just going to sew it this way. I'm not even going to use any bias. I'm just going to sew it round this way because I still want to enjoy the flex of the neck. I mean the stretch of the neck. So I'm just going to sew it this way. So the only thing I'm going to do is that I will weave this part before stitching it downwards. So, and you can still sew it like that. It's not a material that would loosen. So once I'm done with that part, once you've joined the shoulders, the 2 shoulders together, you're going to sew the neck round. So you come to this part here, you measure 7.5 from the line, from where you started your sewing, not from here again, from this place. You measure 7.5, which is my own round sleeve, depending on whatever your own round sleeve is. So I'll measure 7.5. From the 7.5, I'm just going to use 1 inch and I'll sew it down to this point here, and I'll continue my sewing. Let me place it well so that we can see. So from the 7.5, you're going to sew 1 inch this way, and then you continue the 1 inch downwards. You do the same for the other side, and then you can turn it towards the other side. So after turning, I'll show us how to fix the band, and then we'll hem the edges and we are through. Alright, so I'm done with the sewing. I'm left with just the band. So I'm going to show us what I did now. I told you that we're going to join the shoulder together, the 2 shoulders together, and because of the nature of this material, it was not sewing easily, so I had to use a stay. This is a very, very soft stay, so I cut it into tiny pieces and placed it on where I wanted to sew, and I was able to achieve the sewing. So after doing that, I did the same thing for the neck. I just turned it round, tiny turning in. Can you see? So I used the, don't, never mind the white stuff you are saying, it's the stay, and I don't want to pull it too much. It will leave by itself while we wash. So once I was through with that, I measured the 7.5 that I needed for my round sleeve, and then from the tip of the 7.5, I made a little curve. Can we see that? To 1 inch, and did that 1 inch straight downwards. I did the 1 inch straight downwards. So you can just carefully pull out this stay if you are using my kind of fabric. So I did the same thing for the other side too. I measured the 7.5, and then I sewed it with a little curve from this tip downwards using 1 inch. When I was through with that, I actually hemmed the lower part of the clothes, as you can see. So, and this is the outcome. So this is what it looks like. So it's big on this side, and then it slopes downwards, it becomes smaller. Can we see that? By the time I iron it out, to really look good. So now the last thing I want to show us, this is my band. So the right side facing the right side, I'm going to place it this way. Measure my 7.5 and sew straight downwards. I'm going to measure the 7.5, sew straight downwards. I'll do the same thing for the other side too. The front side facing the front side, the right side facing the right side. So I'll measure my 7.5 and sew it straight downwards. So this is what it looks like after sewing it. I'll turn it now and show us. So I opened this part up and then folded it this way into two. Can you see that? So it's as simple as this. So I'm going to place it around that portion now. So still on the right side, you don't need to turn it. Just make sure this place is opened up this way. And then you place this into it this way. It's outside though, not inside. Can you see that? So I'm going to pin this portion down. So I've pinned it down. So this is it. Can you see that? So you can also decide to pin this portion down. And since I used cutter as the seam allowance, I'm just going to use cutter to sew it round. So, as earlier said, the nature of my of the material I'm using is such that it's not sewing directly, so I have to place a soft stay on it so that it can sew. That's what I'm trying to cut out. So this is the soft stay which I placed on it. I'm going to sew it round. So I want to sew quarter round. Start. So I'm done with the sewing of the band. Can we see what I did now? So all you need to do finally is to just flip it out this way. And you're done. Make sure you trim off all the rough edges and the excess thread. So this is what the band looks like. I've attached it to it. So I'll do the same thing for the other side. And to avoid all this, I'll just carefully remove this. So I'll fix the other band and show us the final outcome of our abaya, our very simple abaya gown. Alright, so this is the final outcome. I fixed the band. This is the neck. This is the other band. So it's as simple as this. So please don't forget to like, watch, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time. Bye.